Silvio Berlusconi, a brief astrological portrait by Ciro Discepolo. From the book L'interpretazione del tema natale, the interpretation of the birth chart. Let Stati Uniti take a look at Silvio Berlusconi's stars. Here, it is my hope that spirits might come, if only for a moment, and that readers look at this birth chart setting aside any strong personal antipathies or political hatreds feelings that have nothing to do with reading an astral map. I will begin by saying that when Uno first started studying this subject, he harbored the suspicion that he might have been born half an hour later than recorded. Eventually, however, he became convinced otherwise. He suspected a later birth because Uno believed the element of persecution certainly linked to the life and persona of the leader of the Casa delle Libertà was so potent and undeniable as to establish, without fear of contradiction, that his son should be considered in the 12th house rather than the first. But he was wrong. Let's see why. First of all, are the persecutions that haunt the dreams and waking hours of the owner of Mediaset real or imaginary? Someone might ask, is there a difference? In my view, none at all. The great Carl Gustav Jung used to say there is no difference between objective reality and subjective reality. In other words, the great Zurich thinker stated that if Mario is a staunch pessimist, he might end up falling down the stairs, and if Giovanna is profoundly optimistic, she might even find money on the street. Was it pessimism that made Mario tumble down? Not in the least. These events are not linked by a cause and effect process, they can be explained through the principle of synchronicity, two or more facts occur simultaneously, linked by the same underlying analogical meaning, regardless of the cause that determined them. So, do you think it is important to know if persecutions exist really in the subject's life, or if they simply populate the distressed visions of his life? In my opinion, it is not important, provided we start from the assumption that Berlusconi is not psychotic, a claim Uno believe even his harshest political opponents would not wish to make. One might then wonder if these persecutions truly exist or if he is the only one who sees them. Well, I would say they do exist, and they are mountain high. I don't have the exact figures, but Uno am certain that from the moment the former Italian Prime Minister entered politics until the time of writing, August 3, 2006, there have been over 500 audits by the Guardia di Finanza. And by audits we mean teams of 50 to 60 men stationed in Mediaset offices, or related ones, for months, seizing computers, attempting to find at least one false invoice. To my knowledge, this has never happened to anyone else, not to Gianni Agnelli, Umberto Agnelli, De Benedetti, Tronchetti Provera, or the Benatans, and we could go on with dozens of prominent names. It is worth emphasizing, we aren't discussing 500 audits for Berlusconi versus 400 for Gianni Agnelli, we are talking about 500 to 0, or 500 to 1. If there is another way to read this, please help me, because there is clearly a problem here. Persecution, therefore, is not only present in an objective sense, but in my opinion it is so blatant and macroscopic that one can only fail to see it if blinded by hatred or simple dislike for the man doing so does a disservice not to him, but to the reading of his stars, which do not cheer for anyone. However, I believe we must still ask, in the face of such persecution, how did Silvio Berlusconi react? Did he flagellate himself? Did he commit harakiri? Did he step aside and let his opponent pass? Not a chance, he continued to fight tooth and nail. Is this typical of a sun in the 12th house? Absolutely not, it is the mark of a sun in the first house. So, why did Uno initially think he had a 12th house sun? Because, I believe, he erred by evaluating only the aspect of persecution and not the way he reacted to it now. The moon closely conjunct Saturn in Pisces, opposite Neptune, is strongly co-signifying of a 12th house sun. But the difference is made by that sun in the first house, which makes the leader of the current opposition behave, in practice, like an Aries rather than a Pisces. Even is strabismus, lazy eye, which becomes evident in certain moments of tension, and I refer to strabismus in a literal, not figurative senses, in my judgment, dependent on the aforementioned Moon-Saturn position, in Pisces, to Neptune, and is not due to a Sun in the 12th. And 10, the sign is heavily compensated. Today, many Libras are of the compensated type. If I had to describe such a Libra, I would say, a person with a dagger between their teeth. Do you have any doubts in this case? We must remember the psychology of the seventh sign of the zodiac. Libra usually harbors a very strong sense of justice which, more often than not, can turn into legalism, justicialismo, tout court. If you are on a public bus and see a scene where a young man, perhaps a YM, bursting with energy and hormones, is sitting reading comics while a frail 90-year-old woman stands next to him with a cane, you can be sure that if there is a Libra on that bus, they will loudly voice their indignation. They will likely be the only person to rebuke the young man and order him to let the old lady sit. The sense of justice in Libras is so strong that many end up as lawyers, judges, or police officers. The problem, however, is that their sense of justice often becomes a thirst for conviction. They wish to become, in a single second, prosecutor, judge, and executioner, of a death sentence naturally. Now, can you imagine anyone more blinded by a legalistic impulse than our subject? I cannot, with the exception of the character who follows him in this book, Antonio Di Pietro, also a Libra. Returning to Berlusconi, let State Uniti observe his Venus in the second house, his economic empire, his personal and corporate financial success, specifically and primarily in the field of television, second house. We could refer to other elements of his birth chart, but I believe we have covered the essentials.